Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Left But Hinata is Confused, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Kiba watched Hinata's lifeless face as he gently massaged her tiny fingers. Her cheeks were deathly pale and her body was much colder than normal. His only solace was found in the evenly spaced sounds of the heart monitor. Kiba observed his friend's chest faintly move up and down, and his thoughts wandered to that night. There had been such a change in her. A determination in her voice he had never heard before. They had been moving so quickly, and she had jumped so suddenly, he didn't have time to stop her, to help her, to protect her. Kiba's eyes began to water as the last thought crossed his mind and he streaked the deep, hideous burn marks that now lined every inch of his friend's body. Hinata, Kiba breathed. What happened to you in there? Slowly, he reached out with his other hand and gently caressed her angelic face. Through his teary eyes, the rays from the sun encircled her, encasing her body in a holy glow. As Kiba watched his angel, his face began to harden and his eyebrows furrowed in frustration. Why? He growled as his hand tightly gripped the white linen sheets by her long, ebony hair. Why, Hinata? Why couldn't you wait for me? Why couldn't you just let me take care of you? Kiba winced as the virginal rays ricocheted off the top of the silver locket clasped around Hinata's long, elegant neck and into his eyes, blinding him momentarily. He blinked and shook his head. The damn sun. He chuckled. I'll shut the blinds for you. As Kiba reached for the faded blue blinds, his eye caught something bright and plant-like. His hand lingered over Hinata, as he meticulously examined the vibrant pink flower sitting before him on the windowsill. His heart stopped momentarily as he forgot to breathe. Then, he pulled the blinds and plastered a smile on his face, even though Hinata could not see him. I see you've had a visitor since I was here last. The thought spun through his chest, as memories of Hinata rocking back and forth in the rain, torn and distraught, flooded his mind. Damn Sasuke, that deserting bastard. Kiba clenched his fists and grit his teeth. I guess it wouldn't have mattered if I had been in there with you. Kiba mused with a hint of melancholy in his voice. I probably wouldn't have been able to protect you anyway, just I didn't protect you from him. I don't deserve to be anything more than your friend, he stated in shame, as he closed his eyes and drew close to Hinata's lifeless face. I'll make this up to you, Hinata. I won't fail the promise I made to you in the woods. I will protect your heart and your strength until the day I no longer breathe. He gently kissed the top of her head, lingering longer than a friend should, and sealing his oath with a bond stronger than blood. Silently he gave her hand one last squeeze and promptly turned and walked out the door, allowing his emotions control over his reserved heart as his body crumpled into a ball against the hard floor. He laid outside of Hinata's room for some time, his heart in bitter agony, before he finally grabbed hold of himself. He still had tasks that needed to be tended to and people to see. Reluctantly, he removed himself from the cold hospital floor and pulled himself together. Naruto stared up at the ceiling. His open smile replaced by tight lips and sad eyes. The conversation he just had with the young doctor running through his mind. A week, he thought, a whole week he'd be cooped up in this tiny hospital room. He turned his attention to the light burns that now graced his arms. He was almost healed, there was no reason for him to stay after today, especially now. Sasuke was still running loose and Sakura was still missing. He couldn't afford to lose any time. He had to go back out there. Damn Tsunade. Naruto's mind began to slow down as he thought about the Uchiha's sinister eyes and the ominous feeling emanating from them. They weren't the same eyes he had remembered from before, and when he had told Naruto to come after him alone, to give him the Kyuubi's power, Sasuke's eyes had flashed the familiar blood red that marked the Uchiha clan's eyes, but there was something darker, more evil surrounding these bloodlusting eyes. Naruto began gnawing on the inside of his lip as he wondered about what he should do. If he went, he would risk destroying the village. If he didn't, he would risk Sakura's life, as well as Sasuke's and maybe even the village. If he gathered a squad, then perhaps they could save Sakura, but if Sasuke was caught, not only would he be a missing nin, he would also be charged with caping and attacking the village. Also, if the mission went bad, he would be risking the lives of his fellow comrades. He'd already seen the consequences of that with Hinata, and his eyes stung at the thought of her lying unconscious in her hospital bed, the picture of death. He could see her face clearly in his mind and turned his head to the window. It would be hours before night came and the normal hustle of the hospital would slow down. He yearned to be next to her again, to confide in her, even if she couldn't respond back. He needed her to listen to him again. It was selfish and he knew it, but he needed someone to speak to now, someone who would make him feel better and give him the strength he needed. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of light footsteps shuffling down the hall. His heart jumped within his chest and stared at the door in anticipation, as the footsteps grew nearer. When the person finally appeared in the doorway, Naruto let out a disappointed sigh and went back to staring blankly at the ceiling. "So you've been in to see Hinata?" Kiba's familiar voice broke the silence. "Yeah," Naruto said nervously as he rubbed the back of his N. "How did you know?" Kiba flashed him a knowing glance accompanied by a satisfied smile. "Your scent, remember." It wasn't the truth, but Kiba decided it would be best to spare Naruto and him the embarrassment. "Oh." Naruto responded sheepishly and then shot Kiba an inquisitive look. "Why are you here, Kiba?" Kiba leaned nonchalantly against the wall with his hands in his pockets. "Tsunade sent me to fill you in on the results of our mission." Kiba paused and licked his lips before proceeding. "She wanted me to inform you our mission was a failure. We failed to bring Sakura home and Neji and Shino lost Sasuke's trail. As of now, we have no leads on their whereabouts and Hinata has been severely injured. Tsunade has already formed a team to go after Sasuke and Sakura. It will be you, me, Shino, Neji and Shikamaru." At the mention of Shikamaru's name, a smirk crossed Kiba's full lips and a small chortle escaped his mouth. Shino was a little annoyed with the last person. You should have heard him complaining about being just as capable and heretical as Shikamaru. He's still bitter about not getting the chance to fight in the last part of the Chunin exams and Shikamaru's promotion over the rest of us. A slight smile appeared on Naruto's face as he thought about the silent and unknown rivalry between the quietest nin in the village and the laziest, but soon the thought disappeared as the rest of Kiba's report sunk in. Kiba acknowledged the blonde's thoughtful expression and continued on with his report. "Tsunade wants us to go back out in a week. Despite the severity of your wounds, she believes you will be healed enough to take on a mission." Kiba Street USD the burn marks along Naruto's arms with an inquisitive stare. "Of course," he said with a raised eyebrow. "It seems that your injuries aren't as severe as they had looked, even though you and Hinata both encountered the same beast." Instinctively, Naruto hid the barely there markings on his arm underneath his blankets. "Yeah, well, Naruto unconsciously rubbed the back of his head as he desperately tried to come up with an explanation. He couldn't tell Kiba that he was the beast they had encountered, that he was the reason Hinata's body had been so devastated. He shivered as the last thought crossed his mind, but Kiba didn't seem to notice. "Anyway," Kiba said, pushing aside the suspicious feeling that had emerged from somewhere deep within him. "Tsunade wants you to report directly to her after you are released from the hospital. By then, we should have a plan and some more information." Kiba turned to walk out the hospital door and hesitated in mid-stride. Don't hurt her," he said softly, before he vanished from sight. Naruto stared at the empty doorway in confusion. Kiba had given him a lot to think about, but the last statement he had made seemed to stick with Naruto throughout the rest of the day. He couldn't figure out who he was talking about, but it reminded him of the cryptic message Shino had given him the night Sakura had disappeared and Hinata had gone after them on her own. Apparently Kiba had been spending too much time with Shino, he was starting to rub off on the guy. Naruto went back to staring at the blank ceiling, allowing his mind to run wild once again. He was so deep in his own thoughts, he didn't notice when he had left the living world behind and entered the world of dreams, where everything he was worried about, everything he was afraid of, took on substance. He leapt fitfully at best. He was chasing after Sasuke and Sakura appeared in front of him, contempt smeared on her face. "I willingly left with Sasuke," she sneered. "You were never good enough for me, he was always stronger, smarter, better." She espered him with every word and suddenly he was the Nine Tails. He was out of control with rage and Hinata appeared. She opened her arms wide and hugged his fiery chest, as he beat and batted her with his paws. She refused to let go and looked up at him with sad eyes. Naruto, come back, she cried. I know you're in there, please come back to me. The village needs you, Sakura needs you. I need you. He hit her once more, irritated by her concern, by her tenderness, by her love, and he looked at her lifeless body on the ground. Suddenly he wasn't the nine-tailed beast anymore, he was just Naruto. There was a girl dressed in white lying in front of him, but he couldn't see her face. Kiba appeared before him, his arms crossed and hate lining his feral face. I told you not to hurt her. He snarled, as he suddenly lunged at Naruto. The blonde ninja just stood there in shock as his friend SD'd him half with a kunai. Naruto desperately sat up in his bed, his breath heavy and shallow. His forehead and back were covered in sweat and his heart raced within his chest. He curled his legs up toward his chest and clung to his knees like a child. He silently cried as the moonlight flooded his room. He couldn't save anyone. He had let everyone down, Sakura, Sasuke, Hinata. At the thought of her name, he suddenly realized the darkness that surrounded him. Quietly, he pulled himself out of bed and snuck down the hallway. He needed to talk to someone, he needed to see her. Hesitantly, he opened the door to her room and took his place next to her bed, just as he had the night before. He meticulously surveyed the way the moonlight hit her and the delicate way her dark hair framed her face. Naruto stared out the window up at the stars. It didn't take him long to find what he was looking for. As he stared up at the stars, his mind wandered to the day he had returned. He ran into Hinata. He was trying to hide from everyone, he had been scared and she made him feel welcomed and as if he had been missed, but most of all he remembered how beautiful she had looked. She had changed so much in the time he'd been gone, he didn't even recognize her, and yet she was still the same. Naruto looked back down at her, searching for the same beauty he had seen. Naruto Street USD the softness in her cheeks, the way her eyelashes brushed the top of her skin and her full, delicate lips. Slowly, his eyes wandered down her long and the memories of him watching her delicately eat her ramen came flooding back. She looked so intoxicating in that dress, and yet, still modest and shy. Suddenly, the memory of her telling Kiba those things in the woods flooded his mind, and a sharp pain crossed his heart. Quickly he stared back up at the two stars looking down at them and Naruto leaned over, taking her hand in his. Hinata, he whimpered, not taking his eyes off of the two celestial boss. I returned, like I promised. He chanced at glance at her, nothing. Still he continued. Do you like to look at the stars? He paused for a moment, although he expected no answer. I do. He continued. When I would look up at the stars, I used to see Sakura's face, and I felt as if she was watching over me, but I can't find her face anymore. Still, I feel as though someone is watching over me, protecting me, but I can't figure out who. He looked down at her face again. I wish you could see this too. He gave her hand a small squeeze and sat there in silence for a while, alternating his gaze from the window to Hinata's peaceful face. He thought about her words in the woods as he sat next to her in his revelry, and he felt a strong need to address this, even though she couldn't hear him. You know, Hinata, he began absently. About what you said in the woods, I want you to know that it's true. I am selfish, I am not the person you thought I was. It took a traitor to the village to show me what everyone else knew all along. I was so caught in trying to prove to everyone that I was worth something that I completely looked over the one person who already thought I was. I only noticed you when I was alone, and needed support. You were always there when I truly needed it, and I didn't even notice you when anyone else was around. I don't deserve to be your friend, but I promise you, when you get out of this, things will be different. I'll be the best friend you've ever had. Then Naruto was silent for a moment. You know, he said with a light laugh. I lost my sweater that day when I returned from training and I ran into you. I must have left it at the training ground, but when I went back to look for it, I couldn't find it anywhere. As he stared at her emotionless face, Naruto swore he saw a slight blush appear on her cheeks and vanish just as quickly. He didn't know why, but heart jumped a little at the idea that maybe, just maybe she really could hear him. He gave her a giant grin and gently rubbed her hand. Now he thought, if only she could help me figure out what I should do. His heart dropped like a weight as he remembered his dream. He gazed at her face some more, hoping he would see some sign of life again, but to no avail. So he took solace just in the fact she was there, and for some reason that made him feel better. He continued smiling at the comatose girl laying in the hospital bed and softly whispered, "I'm glad you're my friend." Then he laid back in his chair, his hands still clasped around hers, and relaxed, basking in the feeling of belonging. Before he drifted off to sleep, Naruto opened his mouth once more. "You know, Hinata, you become more beautiful every time I look at you." He softly breathed. Then he allowed himself to slip into unconsciousness, his hand never letting go of Hinata's. The sun broke through the open window and a light breeze caused the faded curtains to sway gently inside the glistening white room. Kiba stood in the doorway, his eyes burning to let go of the emotion he was holding back and his heart screaming to escape the engulfing flames of the painful fire within his chest. He was sick with jealousy at the sight before him, and he clutched his heart in agony. Slowly he made his way over to the blonde male, still sleeping in the chair next to the beautiful black-haired angel in the hospital bed beside him, clutching her hand in his own. Emotions he didn't even recognize raging inside his fragile body. Kiba bit his bottom lip, keeping the water threatening to spill over his eyes from flowing, and lightly laid his tanned hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto's eyes lightly fluttered, and soon his sleepy blue eyes meet with a pair of sad brown ones. "Kiba." Naruto flushed and sat up uncomfortably, moving Hinata's arm in his hand. Nervously he looked down at the unfamiliar weight, a crisp red seeping across his face as he quickly let go of the unconscious girl's hand. I was just leaving." He stuttered as he clumsily tripped over the leg of the chair, trying to escape the embarrassment lingering in the room. Kiba ignored his friend's reaction and continued to quietly stare at the girl lying in the hospital bed. He didn't even look to make sure Naruto had exited the room before he took a seat, not in the chair, but on the bed next to his friend. His dark eyes never leaving her face. Slowly he leaned over her, brushing her dark strands aside to reveal her perfectly flawed features. Her skin was too white, while her hair was too dark. Together they should have left her looking pale and but instead they made her face pop, and when she was awake, they made her eyes look alive. Kiba longed to see her white, lavender eyes once more as he slowly caressed her cheek. He thought about all the times he had caught those same eyes watching that same blue-eyed, yellow-haired shinobi he had just ran into, and how he had longed she would one day look at him the same way, and now, he thought as his mind flashed back to the image of Naruto's hand securely wrapped around Hinata's. "I can't do this anymore," he quietly whispered, a tear staining her white face. "I can't take it. I can't." Kiba's voice broke, his hand searching for hers. "I thought I could step aside, I thought I could help you, as long as it was what you wanted. I thought I could take just being your friend, the person who would always be there for you, the one you could always count on to catch you. But, the truth is, I want to be the only one to catch you." Kiba swallowed hard, one hand grasped tightly around hers and the other running through her long, silky hair. "Please Hinata, I need you to wake up." Slowly, he bent down, his eyes closed, his palms sweaty and his heart thumping wildly in his chest. Blindly, he carefully searched for her, the anticipation swelling inside him. Suddenly, a cool sensation ran through his body, as he gently pressed his warm lips against hers, and a pleasant rush of emotions washed over his body. Reluctantly he broke away, his face hovering inches from hers. He stared at her in silence before lightly nuzzling her nose with his. Then he turned to stare at his hands intertwined with hers. His heart skipped, and he knew this was how it was supposed to be, where he was supposed to be. Leaning in for another stolen kiss, Kiba stopped himself, gazing longingly at Hinata's closed eyelids. Hesitantly, he reached inside his pocket and pulled out a small heart-shaped picture. Narrowing his eyes in concentration, he opened the heart-shaped locket lying weightlessly on her end and placed the tiny photo inside and closed the silver locket. Then Kiba leaned in once more, and softly placed a kiss on her forehead and pulled away, bringing his nose to hers once more. "I love you," he breathed, as the tears freely rolled down his cheeks and he stole one last kiss. Kiba gently squeezed her hand once more, before making his way out of the bright hospital room and down the hall. Hinata's finger twitched slightly, as she furrowed her delicate brow from the effort. Kiba," she whispered softly, before losing consciousness. Hinata's consciousness swam through a dark sea of nothingness as she floated further into the empty abyss of her mind. Every once in a while, she would feel a slight twinge, almost as if she was being touched. Then, Normally some sounds would follow, she thought they were voices, but she wasn't sure, the sounds were too muffled and too distant for her be sure, but Hinata didn't care. She continued to gently drift along, unchained from her gilded prison and paralyzing emotions. She was at peace, free to relax and to just exist. She floated through her mind, content with the emptiness that surrounded her and filled her. Suddenly, she heard a voice, far away and lonely, and she felt the distinct feeling of water drops on her ivory skin. Suddenly, the vast emptiness that had filled her was replaced by an overwhelming wave of concern. The voice seemed so familiar, but yet inaudible. It was strangely comforting and pulled on her heart. The sadness was more than she could bear. Desperately she tried to swim closer to the sound, straining her ears. Then, she felt a light brush against her hand, then her nose and finally her lips. I have to go back, she thought, I can't turn my back on myself, on my friends. She swam faster and harder than she had before toward the direction the voice came from. Suddenly everything went silent and panic consumed her. Was she heading in the right direction, or was she swimming further away from her friends, her happiness, her life? Then she heard a familiar voice, filled with a sorrow, love and a yearning she had never heard before. The words, I love you, echoed through her head as she desperately tried to make her way to the surface. Finally, she felt her finger break through the surface as she forced her head out too. Then, as if someone was pulling her down, Hinata felt herself being sucked back under. Before the darkness reclaimed her, she screamed for him, for her protector. Kiba's name was swallowed by the darkness as Hinata's head was pulled under and she went back to floating aimlessly through the darkness of her mind, but instead of the content emptiness she had felt before, her heart was now filled with panic and worry as she desperately struggled against the suffocating prison of freedom in her mind, losing her fight for consciousness. Hinata looked around, she was still floating through the dark sea with no sense of how much time had passed. Her mind replaying the voice inside her head. I love you. The words repeating over and over again like a broken record. She couldn't give up, she had to be strong. Her friends needed her, Naruto needed her, Kiba needed her. Once again she began swimming against the current of her mind, her determination carrying her through the tides blocking her way. She wouldn't give up this time, she would find her way back. Suddenly, her hand hit something hard, like ice. Her eyes went wide as she realized that it was blocking her way out. The all too familiar feeling of defeat creeping through her. She was trapped with no way out. Too weak to take care of herself, just like always. Then those three words played through her head again. I love you. I love you. I love you. Suddenly Hinata furrowed her brow in concentration. Someone believed in her, someone cared about her, someone loved her. Hinata channeled her chakra to her hands. I can do this, she thought, I am strong enough. Then she took a deep breath and closed her eyes as she swiftly ran her glowing blue hand into the clear ice above. The air was cold and froze her lungs as she gasped for air. She laid there for a moment, trying to catch her breath, her heart racing from the effort she had exerted. So you're awake. An emotionless voice came from the end of the bed. Hinata tried to open her eyelids, but was met with resistance. Frustrated, she took a deep breath and bit her lip as she forced open her heavy eyelids. Her hazy white eyes were met with the dark sunglasses of her quiet bug-wielding teammate. Where's Kiba? Her voice cracked. He's not here right now. He came by this morning. Shino stated as he shifted slightly against the wall, his long jacket covering his mysterious face. Oh, was all Hinata managed as her eyes fell to plain hospital sheets her hands had subconsciously begun playing with on the bed. Shino raised an eyebrow and Saint USD his teammate before speaking. He'll be back, we've been taking shifts watching over you. It was his idea. Shino hesitated, uncertain of what he was doing. Really? A slight smile appearing on her pale face. Shino watched intently as a quick light flashed through the cloudy whites of her eyes and faded just as fast. He had seen it before in longer spurts, but it was the same, there was no doubting it. Shino gave her an invisible smile. I'm sure he'll be back to see you again soon. In a few days him and I will be going back with Neji, Shikamaru and Naruto now that his wounds have healed. We weren't supposed to leave for another 3 days, but the Hokage decided to move up the mission date because Naruto healed faster than expected. Now we'll be leaving the day after tomorrow. At the mention of Naruto's name, Hinata's eyes began to swell with water and her cheeks went red from embarrassment. She remembered the terrible words she had said in the woods, after her encounter with the mind jutsu. The jutsu had been so clear, so real. She had been so confused, so shaken up. She remembered cringing away from his presence, feeling scared of him and vulnerable. Kiba had tried to comfort her, to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. Shino observed her in her quiet solitude, watching her expression change from embarrassment to shame and confusion. He has been here to see you too, Shino said, reading her mind from a distance. Hinata glanced up at her friend, surprise outlining her soft face. What? Naruto, he's been here to see you, Shino repeated. Kiba told me he's been here every day, checking on you, making sure you're okay. He has. Hinata felt the heat rise to her cheeks and looked down once more, trying to hide the emotion she freely wore. Yes, that's what comrades do, you know, Shino continued. They look out for one another. Hinata's eyes began to feel heavy once more, but she pushed the feeling aside. Do they have any clues Sasuke's whereabouts? As of yet, we have no leads, Shino said, his head downcast in shame. Oh, sorry, Hinata stammered, afraid she had upset her teammate. Don't worry about it, I should have been more aware of my surroundings. Hinata wasn't sure, but she thought she could. Shino's eyes look at her over the top of his dark glasses, and an emotion shot through them she couldn't quite put her finger on. Confused, Hinata let the moment go. Don't worry, it won't happen again, this time he won't get away. The clinical way he said, as if he were about to stamp the last page of paperwork on his desk, sent shivers up her spine, and for a moment Hinata didn't recognize her dark-haired friend. She watched as he casually glanced at his watch and stiffly bowed at her at the foot of her bed. I am sorry to be leaving so soon, but I am late, for a training session with my father. Shino's voice shook nervously and Hinata gave him an inquiring look, but he never noticed as he left her hospital room in haste. How odd, Hinata thought as she stared at the open door to her room. Then she shrugged her shoulders and turned toward the window in her room. It was then a pink blur caught her eye and she picked herself back up to examine the strange object decorating the windowsill in her room. Carefully she picked the large flower out of the vase that contained it and meticulously examined every thorn, and every petal. The flower seemed oddly familiar, but somehow she couldn't place it. She laid back down with the pink token placed securely between her fingers. She watched the pretty leaves as she gracefully twirled the flower in hands and gradually gave into the soft call of sleep deep within her mind. As she drifted off, images of the pretty spectacle filled her thoughts as she loosely clung to the flower close to her bee. Finally, Naruto thought as he watched the bright lights up in the midnight sky. The sounds of the hospital had slowed down for the day once again and the lights on the floor had dimmed. Quickly Naruto jumped out of bed to make his nightly stroll down the hall. Today had been especially hard and he needed to see her again, just for a little bit. His cheeks went slightly red as the memories from this morning crept into his mind. He forced those thoughts out of his mind and focused on the issues that were bothering him most. Thoughts of Sakura and Sasuke had been running in his mind and he felt even more confused about what to do. Even if she couldn't talk back, she always seemed to make him feel better. Eagerly he made his way down the hall and hesitated in the doorway, just as he always did, before entering. I'm not going to stay too long tonight, he reminded himself. Silently he made his way to the deflated hospital chair next to her bed and sat down beside her. He street USD her silent somber for a moment, noting the way her face always seemed so peaceful. Almost instantly, his insides began to calm down and his mind began to clear. Happily he reached for her white hand and unconsciously began drawing tiny circle on along her skin with his thumb. Hinata, he silently whispered with a smile. Suddenly, the smile on his face faded as the pink flower in her other hand began to move over the top of her head and her eyelids began to flutter. Damn it, how had he missed that? Then the next thing he knew he was staring into a pair of light hazy eyes. Naruto. A sweat-groggy voice broke the silence, as Naruto froze in his seat, his face hot and his hand interlocked with hers. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.